Thank you guys for coming. Like, honestly, I really appreciate this. Like, I get to do this like 3 or 4 times a year. It's just, it's a treat for me to be able to talk with you guys and share a little bit about what the Lord's got going on in my heart. And is there a lot of echo? Yeah. Should I just take this off and go to a mic? Okay. Keep going. There we go. So before we start, I'm going to pray, get us in the right mindset, get me in the right mindset. So bow your heads, close your eyes with me. Lord, thank you so much for these students. You know, they don't have to be here, but they come because they want to learn, they want to grow, and you've given us as staff and the opportunity to just share truth with them. And I pray that tonight as I talk that you speak through me, that it's your spirit working in my heart, and nothing on my agenda, nothing that I want to get across, but it's stuff that you have for them, Lord. So I thank you for tonight, and I pray that we can all learn about what it means to love people. So I lift this time up to you. In your name I pray, amen. Yeah, so as those MCs shared, there's been a lot of random things that have happened to me, but that'll be for another time, another place. Yeah, there's always some random new fact I could always throw out with them. It's always fun. So, for any of you guys who were here last week, are there any new people, like this is your first time here? Oh, I know, I'm calling you out. I like how that played out. 2 people raised their hand, then everyone got excited. You're like, wait, no, I am too. That's good. There's nothing bad about being new. I'm just seeing if this pertains to you or not. Because last week we had a series start about that motto that the MCs say every week. You know, we're a group of people who love Jesus, love people, and want to give everyone the chance to know him, right? If you've been here a while, you've probably heard that at least 30 times a year, give or take, due to the 30 weeks you're here. And for some of you who are new, you're like, I've only heard that 2 or 3 times. Good, you're on track. It's good. So we've been picking apart that statement to kind of see what we value as a ministry. We don't really need to go into the we are a group of people, because you could probably, through context clues, have figured out what that means. It's us. Tristan last week processed through what it means for us to love God. I think, honestly, the way that phrase is even said, just we're a group of people who love God, love people, and want to give everyone a chance to know him, all of those things just flow into the next one, which is why it's set up that way. First off, like Tristan said, we love God because of what he's done for us. I think I'm going to give like a little mini gospel coverage on that, but I think it's just good to look back and see why we do love God. He took the first step to kind of come and reconcile things between us as a people. I mean, most of us are broken. All of us are bad. All of us have issues, and I'm not saying you're just despicable, pathetic, useless human beings. Just the reality is we've messed up. We've had issues throughout our lives, and the Lord sees that. And the way things used to work for Jerusalem is they would have to continue to make sacrifices to atone for that, which is what they used to do. They would have to choose their best animal in their flock, and they would sacrifice that pretty regularly for an atonement. And the idea behind that was the animal was innocent. It was their best animal, and the animal didn't know right or wrong, and it would take the place of the Jew in the time of atonement, and that is to make things right between themselves and the Lord. And the animal would be sacrificed, and that blood that was let out was supposed to be innocent blood, which is what was supposed to cover the Jews in those times so they could be presentable to the Lord. And it sounds like a really intense, archaic institution that existed. And so what the Lord did instead is he came down as an ambassador for us and offered himself as a sacrifice instead, meaning that him with divine blood said, I'm going to bear suffering, I'm going to bear a slaughter for your guys' names because I love you so much and I want to be with you again. I'm tired, like we don't need to do this old system. I want a new system that's based off of love, that's based off of my care for you, and I want you. And I don't want you to have to keep doing this. And so he came down, taught a different message, and changed the way Judaism even functioned, and it became Christianity, which is what we believe now. And because of that act, like the Lord took the first step to show what it meant to have sacrificial love, which is what then pushes us to love people. And we never really understand what this love was without that first step done by him. So that gets me onto my topic, which is loving people. Because of what he's done for us, that gives us the ability to love others now. It's kind of like, when you're in class, an example is shown to you, you can then replicate that example. Same thing, except for the Lord used the whole world as a classroom that day. It's pretty sweet. So now when we look at this portion, I'm kind of pigeonholed, if I were to be honest, because what the Lord did provided a means for us to share the gospel with people. But that has to be done through love. And Abby is going to talk next week about what it means to bring the gospel to people. And I'm like this middle ground between everything. It's like what starts us getting into sharing the gospel with others. But it's very crucial. I can't emphasize enough throughout this talk why love is so powerful. So if you kind of hit the end of the talk with me and you're like, he didn't really talk about sharing the gospel with people, it's next week. I'm not neglecting it because I don't believe in it. I do it all the time. It's part of my job. It's part of what I do. And in essence, I'm going to cover half of Abby's talk anyway, unfortunately, because it's just really hard to navigate love without talking about the gospel and bringing it to others. And so first off, I want to kind of base this talk off of Scripture. Like if I'm going to preach to you guys, I'm going to share with you guys why we do what we do, and I don't base it off Scripture, I don't base it off of what Jesus has asked of us, then what am I doing here, right? Don't listen to me. So let's get into the Scripture. Let's start seeing what Jesus had to say on the topic. So if you can go to Matthew 22, I'm going to be focused on verse 37, but realistically it starts in 34. And I'm just going to get going. Don't get distracted trying to follow. Just listen to my voice if you need to. But it starts off, so to set the scene, the Pharisees and Sadducees were talking with Jesus and kind of grilling him a little bit just to see if he had like the intellectual chops to declare himself a rabbi. And I'll navigate who those people are in a second. But first off, it says, "But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. And one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question to test him. 'Teacher, is the great commandment, teacher, which is the great commandment in the law?' And he said to him, 'You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments depend all the laws and prophets.'" So to start off there, these two, I guess they're like parts of Judaism. Like they're two representatives, two groups, the Sadducees and the Pharisees. Pharisees were all about the law. Because if we look back at the Mosaic Law, there was like 600 different laws that they were following, which is a lot. And then some of them were positive, like cultural tradition laws, like as a Jew, we celebrate this, and as a Jew, we do this. And then others were like reprimand laws, like if you do this, that's bad, punishment. And then they kind of had like heaviness to them, like similar to us, like it's pretty weighty if a murder charge is put on you versus a text while you drive charge, I guarantee you everyone in this room texts while they drive. And probably not a lot of you murdering people, but who's to say? But when they looked at this, they wanted to see what in your mind is the heaviest law. And he answered actually correctly. He gave them the answer that they were looking for, but the funny thing was they weren't really acting that way. And so for a Pharisee, they were all about the laws. Like their lives were around it. They were like the goody two-shoes, look at me, I'm doing all the right things, where the Sadducees were more oratory, like teachers of the law, like I'm going to tell you the story of us as Jews, and we will honor that tradition. And so they didn't like each other as much, but they all didn't like Jesus because he was trying to bring in a whole new concept to their religion. But he kind of owned them. Like he brought it. And it says like at this point the Sadducees were silenced because he gave them these commandments. And this satisfied the Pharisees in the end. And the reality is like this is what Jesus established his ministry off of, was making sure God was the priority with everything that we have. And through that, that's going to put out an outpour of love from us to everyone. And I know some of you are like, well, what does that mean for us? He was honestly setting the stage for what would become Christianity, which then shook the Jews' lives up even more, because what happened later is, he died on the cross and then gave the next greatest commandment he had, which was go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, which meant go out to all the people And for them, they were probably like, oh my goodness, that's a lot. It's like, yeah, that's the whole world. You got that right. Early church, like that's a lot to tackle. But they didn't go everywhere right away. They started where they were, and they just took the steps to start going out. But what that meant for Jews was to say, like, you are no longer the chosen ones. The whole world are my chosen ones now. Spread that message. And they were like, excuse me, even them, the dirty people? It's like, yes, even them. And to even give you some perspective into what a Gentile was to most Jews, in fact, all Jews, was to say, like, say I, as a Jew, wanted to marry a Gentile. My family would host my funeral on the same day as my wedding, saying that I am now dead to them as a people. It was that level of intensity. So it's like dramatic grandma almost. Like, he's dead to me. Like, I don't want him. And I think in that perspective, like, that was their honest opinion of everyone outside of their culture, which was very intense. It's bigoted. It wasn't good. And what Jesus said is, these are now all my people. Now love them as your neighbor. And it was like, oh man, I have a lot to attend. Like, there's a lot of fixing there. I mean, it's a little bit about, well, I'm sure we feel some semblance of that happening today. I'm not going to go there, but realistically, like, I think we can grasp the concept of people groups being hated. And that's what was happening in the early church. That's what Jesus started with. Love these people as you would want to be treated. And I know even some of you are like, well, I like to be left alone, so maybe I'll just, it's like, no, don't get out of this. Like, in that same regard, I think we can all take steps back and see what we all want in terms of a people. Like, we want certain things that are like non-negotiables. Like, we want to all be loved, right? We all want to be known, understood. Or who wants to be misunderstood all the time? Who wants to be unloved? Who wants to be disregarded, minimalized, rejected? Yeah, it's not in my top 10. In fact, it pisses me off when it happens. And I don't like it. It's like, I didn't say that. That's not what I was trying to say. And it happens all the time. I say the wrong things. But I think for us, as we take steps in love as Christians, what started with the early church was this idea not of like full-on acceptance of everything. It's like, oh, you believe this? Come on in. We believe it too. It was more, oh, that's where you're at? Let's talk. Let me see where you're at. Let me love you where you're at. And it began this new teaching of humility, because once the Jews were a very prideful nation, not like, well, I guess there was arrogance there, but there was pride in being a Jew. There wasn't pride in being some of these other people groups. But now, this whole family paradigm shift. Like, it was no longer about one group, but it was for all groups. And all these groups came together. And one of the toughest parts about that early church was finding ways in which to love each other well. And it got hard. It was very difficult early on. Even some of the disciples or the apostles, they butted heads over stuff. Like, it was a tough thing to navigate. And as we like bring that into where we are now, it's like, what does that mean for us to be Christians, loving everyone? Because the scope's gotten a little bigger, right? It's no longer taking a trip over to Greece. I mean, some of you still do that, which is cool. But it's not a small scope. It's worldwide now. And it's no longer like one city vying for your attention. Like Paul would have, Philippi getting his attention and Ephesus getting his attention. The places he would visit would just constantly pop back into mind, which was like stressful. But now we have the entire world screaming for attention to some extent, right? I mean, it's now a thing to go on social media fasts because there's so many things vying for your attention and vying for your opinion and vying for your care, vying for your love, vying for everything in you. It's like, that's stressful, right? I don't know how half you guys make decisions on stuff. I don't go on that because it's just like, it's too much for me. I get too caught up and too invested into things, and my heart wants to go everywhere, which I honestly believe the Lord asked me to be aware and present with those things. But realistically, if I go back to the text, what he's asking me to do is to love my neighbor as a priority. Not to say any of those things are not worth my time, which is totally not true. But right now, like, I have the people around me that the Lord's called me to. And I need to see who he's called me to first before having to invest into something and invest into something and invest into something. Because I think we can see the hurt that exists in the world, and we can find a microcosm of that here. Like a small glimpse of the hurt that is existing everywhere. Right here at Cal Poly Pomona. We're one of the most diverse campuses in the world. And so that means we're getting a lot of people from different backgrounds. When I work with Bridges, I get students that are affected by wars in their country. They don't know if they're going home. They don't know if their family's alive. I have students that come from families where they're not happy that they're in America for very long. They somehow snuck over. I'm like, whoa, what'd you do that for? And we have people who come from different parts of our country, different parts of California that have different upbringings, that have different hurts, different brokennesses. And I think that's something we forget. That was something the early church did very well because everyone was just kind of shaken up a bit, you know? There were some issues that existed that were really hard for them to navigate, but currently if we look at where we are as a people group, like here in America, there's just different hurts from everywhere. And I think it's very important for us to start taking appropriate steps of care towards people. And it's very hard. Many of you, like, fortunately, a lot of you guys know me now because I'm a little better than I was. And I don't say that like in a jokey, like, ha, if only you would have seen me as a youngin'. Like, I was an offensive kid. I was a jerk. Like, I don't know, like I'm still kind of a jerk. Like, so who should be giving you the message on love? Probably not the guy that makes half of you feel uncomfortable the first time you meet him. Like, every time I talk to someone, like, how'd you feel when you met me? They're like, you were kind of weird. You were kind of creepy. You were intense. I thought you hated me. And I'm like, well, that's definitely the list of, modeling Jesus, because that's what they all said, right? And when I look back at, like, what allowed me to even feel like I belonged somewhere, right? How did I encounter my early church experience here? I didn't grow up a Christian. I hated Christians, man. I went to a Christian school. Everyone was so mean to me. They were just super derogatory. My two best friends, like, one guy could ask for any drug I wanted to if I needed it. The other guy was always drunk. And I'm like, he's in school. He's in high school. How's he doing that? And I'm like, you are Christian? Like, what? What's happening in my life? It blew my mind. Like, these were like the staples of Christendom where I grew up. So I just was like, there's no way. And when I came to Cal Poly Pomona as a freshman, now 10 or 11 years ago, ooh, goodness gracious, I was crass, man. I didn't have a good people, like, I didn't have good people surrounding me. I was mean. People didn't like me, and I got involved in crew. As a non-Christian, mouthy and offensive, cussing up storms and offending every race possible because I thought it was funny. I was like, I don't know how I had friends. My best friend was a black guy. I don't know how he's still my friend. I said mean things, like, and he was just like, ha, 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 ha. And then later, like, I'm so thankful I had him because he just changed everything for me. I think it was just one of those things where my blinders are on. I have no idea I'm doing something dumb. And then finally he called me on it, and it sucked, but it was it was good. I didn't know, like, the hurt I was causing. I didn't know frustrations that had existed because of me, but he took the time to care for me. And he, bless him, walked me through it. His name's Harrison, and I hope to get him around here sometime. So, man, like, he was definitely a stepping stone in why I became a Christian. It's crazy. Like, I'm trying to even think of what he just called me out. I think one time I just said something super inappropriate, and definitely not repeating it, and he just grabbed my shirt, he's like, no, outside. And I'm like, okay. And then he just started to, like, lay down, like, he was very gracious, but he was very truthful in what I was doing and how I was hurting him. And then he said, because I was in my own personal walk trying to find Jesus. Like, people had already been challenging me to find who God was for me. And he was like, hey, you look like you could use a partner. And he just started walking through stuff with me. Cool dude, right? He's still single. He's just older. Now, honestly, that guy, like, and then he was my friend from there on. Like, any question I had, I went to Harrison. Any frustration that happened to me, I went to Harrison. And then I kept checking myself because other people would say something a little racist towards them. And it was just like in jest. It wasn't someone being mean, but it was just something a little, probably not so great. And I even asked him, I was like, hey, how does it make you feel when I do that? Like, I said this, like, how does that make you feel? He's like, it really hurts. Like, you're perpetuating it. You're not really caring for me. you're choosing to not value me over valuing this. Like, it's just a joke to you, but for me, like, you're just degrading me, and that sucks. And leaps and bounds, like, I had to take my steps of growth. But I was in a community, like, and it wasn't just him. It was him and then the guys I lived with. It was the people who took me under their wing. It was the people who showed me care when I was just, you don't love people like me, right? Like, you don't want to love people like that. Like, I made people cry for fun. What a jerk. Like, I look back on me, I'm like, thank God for God. Like, thank goodness you were always here for me, because I'd be just toast. I'd have no hope. There'd be nothing about me that would be super worth redeeming. It was just not good. And as time has gone on, like, I'm so thankful for the people who took me in, because I was a lost cause. Like, it wasn't worth people's time. But before I knew it, like, people were trusting me to lead a Bible study, and I'm like, whoa, are you dumb? Like, I don't know this. Like, are you sure? Like, what if they turn out like me? They're like, hit or miss, you know? Like, we'll see what happens. And I'm like, okay. And those were like my steps with taking faith. And then I had guys in my study that were like me a few years before, and I'm like, Harrison, how did you deal with this? Like, oh! And I think it just grew year by year, my capacity for love. And luckily, like, each year is like a new learning curve for me, figuring out what it means to love more deeply, to love more fully. And then I slowly got to take a change for myself from being the ministered to ministering to others. And I got thrown out big time when I got asked to do ministry in my department. And any comm majors out there? Yeah. Alfonso, I know you are too, Nicole. But there's other people, like, I got asked to go to a pretty, like, weird department. Like, it's just a bunch of people that kind of landed there, whether they wanted to be there or not, and it's just a strange environment. And none of them were really Christian. And so now I'm kind of being asked to, like, go and reach people where I was. And one of the toughest things for me was trying to figure out what it meant to love well. Like, what does it mean to love appropriately with God at my back, you know? To let the Spirit truly lead me. And guess who did it wrong? This guy. Like, I just started off, and I'm like, you know, anytime I could have just sat and loved, I sat and spoke. It started to become give my opinion mode on everything. Like, oh, you do this? Well, I think this. And da-da-da-da-da. And I cringe. Like, I cringe when I think about how I just misappropriated the time I had for the first bit. But as time went on, the Lord humbled me, and I began to do like an in-depth study on what it meant to love well. And when it looked like, you know, when you look in 1 Corinthians 13, it's like, love is patient, kind, you know, it's good, gentle, like, doesn't hold records of wrongs. I'm like, oh man, like, I don't think I'm doing any of that stuff. And it helped me just to kind of take myself back and really just ask the Lord to be with me in these situations to make sure I'm caring for people, because my priority is people in this time. And because of that step, it allowed me to have really good conversations with really tough people. I've shared this story before a lot. It's honestly one of the most shaping encounters I've had when it came to loving someone appropriately. And that's why I share it, not to be like, look how good I am, but it's like, look how good God is to have gotten me to a good spot to have a good conversation. But it was when I was in my comm department. I was still a student many moons ago. And the girl knew I was a Christian, but she didn't think I was like a Christian. She just thought I liked church and talked about it occasionally, and went on summer missions and was in a club. And I don't know what she thought, like how uninvolved I was with how involved I was, but that's what she got. But I knew she was bisexual, and I knew that was a big talking point for us. And we had talked about it, but for some reason she had forgotten we had talked about it numerous times, but whatever. So one day she approached me, and she was doing research for the Poly Post, and was like, I went to look up for who president of Christian club on campus was. Guess who I found? I'm like, well, it's probably me. It's me currently. And so she's like, yeah, it's you. You're the president of crew. What does that mean? And I was like, well, it means I got to go to a couple meetings a year, answer emails from parents. She's like, no, like, what does that mean for us? And then initially, Brock starts off where Brock shouldn't. He's like, so you know I'm bisexual, right? So what does that mean for us? And I'm like, well, it means we got something in common, right? Girls. And she, no, yeah, you go, why would you say that? I shouldn't have. Like, everything about me looks back on that moment, and I go, what a stupid person. And I had to just stop because she swatted me on the chest, like, boom, not funny. And I'm like, I'm not loving them well. Like, it just, like, was it worth getting that laugh? No, it wasn't. Like, in the end, like, I look back and, like, I started off poorly with her, and I had to take a step back. And I'm like, God, you need to help me because you know I need help. I can't do this right now with just me at the helm. Like, I need you to help love this person right. And she's just like, I knew it. I knew that I knew you were really into this thing. Like, so what does that mean? Like, you think I'm going to hell, don't you? And she just calls it off right off the bat. I'm like, well, my religion states, like, if you believe in Jesus, like, I believe you'll be in heaven. But if you don't, then it says you won't. You will be in hell. And she's like, so then I don't. And I was like, it's kind of an A-B thing, like, yeah. And she's like, so I'm going to hell. And I was like, well, let me take a step back. I was like, have you ever felt me condemn you like that before in our relationship? She's like, no. Like, you know I don't have to be your friend, right? Like, I don't choose to be your friend because it's like on my agenda, it's on my list. Like, I chose to be your friend because I care about you. Like, I really do love you as a friend. Like, I love you as a person. And she's just like, all right, well, it looks like our relationship's going to change. And I remember that, like, feeling like I had to fix it in the moment. But I just felt the Lord calm me down and go, all right, well, what does Jesus do? Jesus asked questions. When he was with the woman at the well, he brought up a lot of points to talk with her. When he talked to Zacchaeus, he grilled Zacchaeus. What are you doing up there, huh? Like, getting him to, like, say the things that he needed to say just to verbalize stuff well. And so I was like, all right, do you believe in what I believe in? And she's like, not a bit. I was like, so you don't believe in hell? She's like, no, not at all. I'm like, all right, well, then it's not real. I'm telling you, you're going to a place of fiction. You're not going anywhere, right? And she's like, yeah, but it's the fact you think I'm going somewhere. And I was like, well, just let me share a little bit about why I do share my faith with you if I do at all. I was like, first off, in your life, have you ever been rejected because of the lifestyle you have? Or have you had people reject you or put you aside or dismiss you? Have you ever felt like you don't belong? And she's like, oh yeah, all the time. Those are easy. And I was like, yeah, it's because you don't feel like you have a family here, right? And she's like, not unless it's within my community. And I'm like, all right, well, honestly, that's what I believe hell is supposed to be like. Because all of those feelings are hopeless, right? She's like, yeah, there's nothing good about it. And I was like, I believe hopelessness derives from godlessness. It's where God is not that hopelessness thrives. And I believe hell to be godless, which would exude all of those negative feelings exponentially eternally. Where I believe heaven to be the opposite. I believe, at least from my understanding, heaven to be full satisfaction and contentment in the presence of the Lord, in a family that wants you, with a God that desperately desires to have you with him. So, if I ever do share my faith with you, it's because I would really have to hate you for you to go to the other one, correct? She's like, yeah, that makes sense. And she responded like, I also, it still hurts to know like that's your viewpoint. But I do appreciate that you've taken the time to do this because if that is your reality, yeah, it would make sense that you would have to share that message with someone. I'm like, yeah, like I do love you. And my view of you, like I'm not changing how I care. I'm always here. Still get like emotional when I process that. I did cry then too. Lost credibility then. No. But what happened at the end of that conversation is a lot of respect between. And then that bred into her sharing at least a positive review. It's almost like a Yelp review of me. Like, hey, 5 stars, you treated me all right. Like, and in the end, like, that wasn't done perfectly. It could have probably been handled even better by someone else. But that's what I was able to do in that moment, and I still have a good relationship with her. And my ability to continue to step out in love with my department just opened doors because God was ready to use me then. Like, I did not become ready to love people by practicing. It was a trial run day by day of me taking steps of faith to choose to love people. And it's hard being the guinea pig when you screw up a lot. I screw up a lot. I screw up so much. If you could see like my track record, even like on staff stuff, it's like, ooh, Brock has more errors on his stat record. It's like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Okay, let's move on. But like, reality is like the Lord has used me in a way that I just never thought would happen, to where my friends would reach out to me to be a DD. And then after a while, they saw that I actually cared enough about them to take them where they needed to be, to make sure they got where they needed to go, that they weren't going to get a DUI. And then I started getting calls all the time making sure I was the one caring for them. I got people's boyfriends calling me to make sure their girlfriends get home in the department. And I'm like, all right, cool. Like, I was very trustworthy in that because I would hear people out. People began to then ask questions about my spirituality. They began to ask my opinion on stuff, which then I started to give. It was a year after year after year process. And then I started bringing a few of those people in the crew and letting them encounter the ministry. Some of them liked it, some of it didn't. It's not for everyone. But I brought them to church, and a lot of them loved church. And in the end, like through my time in my department, I got to have numerous friends of mine come to know Jesus. And that's the ultimate win. Like, that's when you know like God's at work, throwing you in the right place at the right time. And it was me sitting with friends who had lost loved ones and answering tough questions. Just praying, just hugging, just loving, letting tears go everywhere, answering tough questions about why I believe what I believe, sitting and shutting up and hearing about where they're at, what hurts them, and how I can love them better. A lot of it's humility. Like, it's not always being right or perfect in it. And I think that loving people this way is the first step to getting to the gospel. Because if you cannot love unconditionally the people around you, there's sometimes no way for them to understand what unconditional love is. How can they believe in a God who offers that if you don't even do any semblance of that? And yeah, we're imperfect. I don't trust any of you guys to love perfectly. I don't trust myself. That's the whole point of grace and the gospel is we're not perfect people. This community is not a perfect one. I've been hurt in this community before, and I know others can and have been. But I ask you, as you take time to be with us, like, know that this is a place that I want to invite you to belong in. Because if you're here and you're thinking like, man, this is intense, like he's talking about steps I'm not even close to, he's talking about a place I'm not even at, you belong here. We're all growing and fumbling through our faith. We're all figuring things out together. There's not a perfect person in here. There's people who are doing well, which is awesome, and I love them. But reality is, this is a loving community. This is my family that we're welcoming you into. And I want you to be a part of it. And if you're thinking like, oh man, I don't really fit in here. I don't really see other people like me here. If you leave and the next person like you comes, guess what? There's still no one like you here. And that person might not feel like they belong either. There wasn't someone like me for a long while in crew, and then I found a little one of me, and I was like, oh, another, like, yay. But what it did was it allowed me to open up my doors and even just my heart to other people and other experiences, and it helped grow me as a person. And if you really want to grow as a believer, if you want to take steps in your faith, like, this is a place for you. If you're not a Christian, this is a place for you. If you have questions, this is a place for you. If you feel like, okay, gonna be honest here, if you're feeling like this place is pretty white, it is. And I'm just gonna explain a little bit, like, this ministry is sharing Christianity through an Anglo perspective. Like, this is definitely from, like, it's very heavy worship, like it can be very emotional then, where we have ministries in our family here at Pomona that have that through the Latino context. They share Jesus that way, and it's different. And we have one for African Americans and Black students as well, and Native Americans. Like, we have places where I want you to encounter the Lord and grow in a place that makes sense for you. And it doesn't, some people might go, oh, well, you're just segregating people again. Reality is, I want you to grow in an environment you're comfortable in, which is why we have other ministries alongside of Crew to do that in. That's how, honestly, I feel like our ministry and organization has loved people well, is because we have like this big hub Christian family in my mind. And we have a lot of people worshiping the Lord from different cultures and contexts down here. And that's a way in which we all get to love other people more fully, is by giving places for people to connect with the Lord the way it just makes sense to them, which is awesome. And I think that's one of the most beautiful things about what the Lord does. Because in heaven, it's going to be all people everywhere praising Jesus, from all cultures and contexts, from every way that you know. But down here, it's a little different. And it's hard to always find a place where you feel like you belong or fit. But I'm telling you, I want to invite you to belong here, because I honestly think you do. And I want to give you an opportunity to be loved on by our students, by our staff. And if you have questions, if you have things you want to process with us, I want to ask our staff to stand up real quick. Any staff? Any staff? Hey! So these people, like, just stay standing. Get a good look at them if you're new. These people are the people that I know I can send you to who will love you well. Like, they care deeply for you, and we get paid to do it. Like, this is our job. All right, you guys sit down. But honestly, it's such an honor to be able to be here and love you guys well. And if you feel like you're a little curmudgeon, or like you mess up, you're like, I don't know if I'm going to do this right, come talk to me. I get it. We all make mistakes on stuff. And if you've come in and you haven't been welcomed fully yet, and it's still been a little awkward as you come in, keep trying. We're not perfect. We're trying ourselves. We got engineers in here trying to do outreach, and they're just like, hello. And I get it. Like, I started Cal Poly as an engineer, ended as a comm major, so I can half of the time nail a conversation. The other time it's like, were you even trying? It's like, I don't know. And to just realize, like, we have people from different backgrounds too. Like, not everyone's like the perfect conversationalist. We're all trying. But that's what we want to welcome you into, is just kind of a misfit family of people from all over, and just know that we're all just trying to serve the Lord together. And I'm just so glad you're here. So now I'm going to pray us out. Thank you for hearing me out. I love you guys. I was praying. All right, dear Lord, thank you for this evening, and just thank you so much for all the new faces I see and all the old faces I see. And I'm just so glad that people are here to hear about you, connect with you, and just learn how to connect more fully. And I pray that, as the year goes on, that we could just grow as a family, come more close as a family, and just love each other well. And I pray that as we go to our ministry areas and we just encounter people in the dorms, the suites, our classrooms, our workplace, that the people you put in our way, we just love well in the same regard. That you just show us what it means to just care deeply for people, to come alongside people, to teach people, and just sometimes just shut up and just listen. And so I lift this time up to you, Lord, as we worship and just come before you, and just thank you that we have so many students here in so many different areas that you can use their abilities and talents to bring more closer to you. So I lift this time up to you. In your name I pray, amen.